Hi, my name is Abigail Lume. This is my presentation for Business 541, Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. I'll start by looking at the overview of what my presentation entails. We'll look at the introduction to sexual harassment, historical background of sexual harassment in the workplace, types of sexual harassment and behavior that can create a hostile work environment, ways that sexual harassment can occur, negative effects of sexual harassment, strategies to stop sexual harassment in the workplace, what an harassed employee should do, protection for a sexually harassed employee, incorporating anti-sexual harassment into organizational culture, and the conclusion. Sexual harassment in workplace has remained a significant and costly problem in today's environment. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission defines sexual harassment in the workplace as unwelcome sexual advances or conduct of a sexual nature which unreasonably interferes with the performance of a person's job or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Sexual harassment in the workplace is a form of sex discrimination that violates 37 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 37 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a federal law that prohibits employers from discriminating against employees based on race, national origin, sex, and religion. Over the years, there have been several lawsuits and allegations of sexual harassment in several industries such as education, movie, food, sports, retail, marketing, advertising, agriculture, fitness, finance, healthcare, journalism, military, law enforcement, and politics. Sexual harassment is a significant problem that has cost a lot of organizations millions of dollars, from payment of lawsuits to settlement of the harassed. Since 2010, more than 51,000 sexual harassment charges have been filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Women file the majority of the sexual harassment cases. However, the percentage of sexual harassment claims filed by men has risen. Sexual harassment can be verbal, racial, written, or physical. Sexual harassment can be traced back to the era of chattel slavery in the 1620s. Chattel slavery is a kind of slavery that existed in the United States before the Civil War. Historically, women were the victims of sexual harassment in the hands of predatory men. For decades, there were few significant changes in the way women were treated at work. The turning point finally came in the mid-1970s as the women's liberation movement began to challenge a justice system as well as the culture at large that failed to recognize women's consent. The campaign against sexual harassment was a natural extension of the grassroots anti-rape and anti-battery movement, which grew out of consciousness-raising sessions in which women shared personal stories and realized they were not alone in their experiences. According to Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, there are two types of sexual harassment: quid pro quo and hostile work environment. Quid pro quo, literally translated from Latin, means this for that. Quid pro quo is a type of sexual harassment where a benefit relating to employment such as promotion, increase in salary, exclusion from difficult tasks is offered to an employee in exchange for sexual favor. Quid pro quo sexual harassment is usually carried out by supervisors or employees in position of authority who use the power of their position to sexually harass their subordinates in the workplace. The organization is usually liable for quid pro quo sexual harassment. The second type of sexual harassment, which is hostile work environment, exists where there is repeated exposure to sexual-oriented behaviors in a way that the sexual nature of the behavior pervades the working environment. Two requirements must be shown to indicate that hostile work environment exists in a particular workplace. The conduct must be unwelcomed, and the conduct must be so severe that it creates an offensive work environment. Behavior that can potentially create a hostile work environment: publicly display pictures, cartoons, images, dolls, and drawings with a sexual theme or of a sexual nature, pervasive telling of offensive, dirty, or sexually related jokes or stories, repeated touching of a sexual nature without permission or consent, the use of offensive terms with a sexual meaning, repeated requests for dates, emails, memos, or other communication with sexual material included. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission says sexual harassment can occur in a variety of circumstances, including but not limited to the following: the victims as well as the harasser may be a woman or a man. The victim does not have to be of the opposite sex. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, an agent of the employer, a supervisor in another area, a co-worker, or a non-employee. The victim does not have to be the person harassed by, but could be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. Unlawful sexual harassment may occur without economic injury to the victim. The harasser's conduct must be unwelcome. Negative effects of sexual harassment in the workplace can be on the company, the harasser, and also the harassed individual. Let's look at consequences for the company. Loss of employee. An employee who is sexually harassed might decide to stop working for an organization. In addition, family members, friends, and co-workers of the victim might quit working for an organization for fear of retaliation. Another consequence for the company is that the public image of the company may suffer, and also profit reduction or financial loss. A company's share of sales of products might drop as a result of sexual harassment allegations against any employee of the organization. For instance, advertisers led Fox Bill O'Reilly show amid sexual harassment allegations. What are the consequences for the harasser? Loss of job, fines and possibility of going to jail if the harasser is found guilty, and it can also lead to bad reputation for the harasser. Now, the negative consequences for the harassed employees are indirect pressure on the harassed to quit the job. The harassed can just quit the job without any pressure. Risk of being promoted. The sexually harassed individual can have decreased morale or decreased job satisfaction, irreversible damage to interpersonal relationship at work, traumatic stress disorder, emotional and physical instability that can result in low productivity of the harassed, loss of wage for the harassed. Employer strategies to stop sexual harassment in the workplace are as follows. The employer should enforce zero tolerance to sexual harassment. It should develop and communicate anti-harassment policy to all staff. The employer should make sure that all employees, old and new, understand the policy and procedure for dealing with harassment by providing training, information, and education to all of them. The employer should also ensure that all managers and supervisors understand their responsibility to provide a harassment-free work environment. The employer should promptly investigate and deal with all complaints of harassment and discipline employees who harass other employees. The employer should also provide protection and support for the employees who feel they are being harassed. The employer should take action to eliminate offensive jokes, posters, drawings, emails, and photos at the workplace. The employer should also regularly monitor and revise the policy and the education and information program to ensure that it is still effective for the workplace. The employee also have their own part to play in order to stop sexual harassment in the workplace. The employee should understand and become familiar with the organizational policy on sexual harassment. They should observe and be aware of engaging in potential sexual harassment behaviors or incidents at work. The employee should be sensitive to individuals who may be offended by their verbal or non-verbal behavior. The employee should also be aware of subtle forms of sexual harassment and watch for and discourage sexual behaviors that negatively affect work. The employee should not assume that other employees enjoy or want to have sexual related jokes or sexually oriented comments about their appearance or be touched, said at for regular and require request for regular dates or sexual favor. What an harassed employee should do. If an employee feels he or she has been sexually harassed, the first thing the person should do is to personally inform the harasser that the behavior is unwelcome. If the communication is effective, the harassed individual can decide to just settle the grievance like that. But if the communication is not effective, the harassed individual can report the sexual harassment allegation to responsible department official. Then the harassed individual can also decide to use mediation process. Mediation is an informal way to resolve office problems using a trained mediator who facilitates communication between the parties to the dispute. The harassed individual can also use the grievance procedure. Civil service employees who are covered by a negotiated grievance procedure may file a grievance alleging sexual harassment. And the harassed employee can also decide to use equal employment opportunity process. An employee who wishes to file a complaint under equal employment opportunity procedure must consult an equal employment opportunity counselor within 45 days of the alleged incident. It is not necessary for an employee who decides to file an allegation through the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to inform his or her supervisor before contacting the Equal Employment Opportunity Counselor. Protection for those sexually harassed. The organization should take necessary steps to protect any employee who feels he or she has been harassed and report the incident to the organization. The employee should be protected from hostility or any form of retaliation. It is a violation of the federal law to retaliate against someone who has reported repeated possible sexual harassment. Violators may be subject to discipline. Employers should incorporate anti-sexual harassment into its organizational culture. They should ensure that the culture reflects no tolerance for sexual behavior and that it is clearly written in its policy. The employer should ensure women have supportive supervisors and work groups since women are mostly the victim of sexual harassment. Posting of zero tolerance to sexual harassment notice in strategic places in the organization, and the employer should regularly assess and train all staff to address sexual harassment issues. Conclusion. The risks associated with sexual harassment claim and allegation and associated litigation can present danger to organizations. Employees are expected to behave professionally and to exercise good judgment in work-related relationships. All employees are expected to take appropriate measures to prevent sexual harassment. Unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature should be stopped before it becomes severe or pervasive and rises to a violation of law. By being proactive, instituting sound policy and offering comprehensive training, employers or management can reduce the likelihood of sexual harassment occurring in the workplace. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.